Hello, and welcome to the Bigger Than Us podcast. I'm your host, Raj Daniels, and today I'd like to welcome Alan Tsai to the show. Alan is the founder and CEO of Pani, a smart home company inspired by his volunteer experience building water wells in rural Nepal. With a professional background in consumer electronics and IoT, Alan took inspiration from a lifetime of water conservation lessons to create Pani to advance the convergence of technology with water, sustainability, and efficiency. Alan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Raj. Thank you for having me on the show.
Alan, thank you for being on. I'd like to kick things off with something interesting about you that you'd be open to sharing during our interview that many people might not know about you.
Sure. It's nothing too exciting, but I'm a father of three, including a set of twins who are 7 years old, turning 8, and love them to death. But a lot of times I get a lot of anxiety thinking about the world that we're leaving them, and not just them, but their children as well. And that gives me a lot of motivation to make sure we're all doing our part to make this world a better place and a better future. As trite as that sounds, Raj, how do we leave our place better than we found it, and for our children and our children's children?
Well, I think then out of the gate, we're fast friends because I'm a father of three also.
Really? Fantastic.
Yes, no twins in there, but they're three daughters.
I've got two girls and a boy. 2 girls and a boy.
Well, I think we can just have a whole podcast just on parenting three kids. So, Alan, can you give a brief background on Pani? What's it about? What inspired it?
Sure. And thanks for the fantastic intro. I went on a volunteer trip last February to Nepal, building water wells for this small little village, and that experience was transformative on many different levels. And really, it's not until we're taught to be grateful. Of course, growing up, and we're taught to be grateful every year on Thanksgiving. But it's not really until you spend some time, in wooden shacks, with no infrastructure for electricity or water or plumbing. Then you really truly realize how fortunate we really are. And so when I returned from Nepal, I started Pani, and I think we've discussed prior. Pani means water in Hindi. We're building smart water products and platforms that helps consumers and utilities measure, monitor, and eventually recycle water, almost in that exact order. So the product that we have in the marketplace today, that we just launched about a month and a half ago, is a smart water meter that learns your water usage habits inside your home, and then using some algorithms and some behavioral science, give you recommendations on how to conserve water. And really, the first product is just to bring some awareness to people about how they're even using water at home, right? So there's an adage in tech that says, you can't modify something until you measure it. And that's exactly what we do, is we start to measure your water usage in order for you to give you some actionable feedback to do something about that usage. Right? So, our investors say we're like the Nest or Fitbit for water. And that's what our first product does.
So the Fitbit for water, I'm going to assume you don't wear it yourself. How does that work?
The Fitbit or the Pani, the monitor?
Your monitor.
Yeah. So it's essentially it's a smart home product that you can install inside your home across various appliances. Most of our users install them on a shower and toilet because combined it accounts for almost half of all the water you use inside the home. And when installed and when water flows through, we start to collect information about water usage. And we share that information with you on a free mobile app that tells you, real time water usage. It shows you how much you use today, yesterday, this week, this month. If we detect a toilet leak, we'll send you an alert. Over time, as we learn how you're using water, we'll give you notifications, almost like a smart water coach, about what you can do based on how you're actually using water to use to be better, to be more water wise, and to be better steward of this, the very precious resource.
So do you install it directly into the shower head?
Yeah, it installs inline. The shower installation takes on average about 5 minutes. The toilet install takes anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes. But in the shower case, what you do is you just unscrew your shower head. You screw our Pani Smart Water Monitor on, and then the shower head on top of that. So it kind of sits between the shower head and the wall, essentially.
And the toilet bowl one, how does that one work?
Yeah, similarly, behind your toilet bowl, there's a tube that connects to the wall. All you got to do is unscrew that tube. Be sure to drain the water out beforehand, and then you install the Pani in between the wall and the toilet bowl.
As we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about an incident I had early this year where we have a rental property, and my neighbor from my rental property called me and said, Raj, there's water gushing out of the side of your house.
Wow.
And what had happened was that one of the hot water heaters had sprung a leak. Fortunately, the way it was installed correctly, and it has an overflow pipe that leads to the outside of the house. So the house didn't have a problem. My tenants weren't aware because they're out of town that weekend. But I'm thinking about how a device like this could have helped me or helped them save money, because I know that the leak was going on for at least 24 to 48 hours, and I don't even know how many gallons passed through that overflow pipe. So I kind of feel like that would almost be like another use case, or even just in general, in the rental industry, I've heard several stories of tenants having, leaky toilets or running toilets, which happen to be, I think you mentioned, the number one, number two cause for either damage to the house or, from a water wastage perspective. So I really think that there are many other use cases too as I start thinking about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The most common leak in the house is actually the toilet flap leak. And what happens is just over time, the rubber gasket degrades, and you either have a slow leak, which you don't hear about until a few months later, or you see your water bill and you're wondering where all the water is going, or the thing, you flush your toilet and the chain gets stuck, and you leave and the water is just running constantly. And just speaking for myself, the Pani has caused several leaks. Several toilet leaks, as a matter of fact, in our house alone. So, it's, to be very clear, from a product positioning standpoint, leak detection is not our main product feature. It happens to be a checkbox feature. We can say it does for the toilet, but there are many other solutions on the marketplace that cost anywhere from $500 to $1,000 that do what they call whole home leak detection. And those are great solutions if that's what you're looking for. But from a positioning standpoint, the Pani Smart Monitor is really centered around better understanding your own personal usage, help you conserve water, and it just happens to be able to catch the most common leak inside the house.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and just to close the loop, before I forget, on the Nepal story, the more our users use our product to save water, the company will actually make donations on your behalf to charities that provide clean drinking water to people around the world. So, quite literally, we want to bring people along on that, visceral and emotional journey, that to let them know that things they do here truly do matter. So, I saved 3 minutes. I showered 3 minutes less yesterday. That saved me 6 gallons of water. Those 6 gallons of water is going to a well project that, someone in Kenya or someone in Nepal or in India is getting that, that clean drinking water.
That's really interesting, and I applaud you for that. It's a very conscious organization. And the reason I say so is I was just thinking about when you mentioned like a Fitbit for the shower. I've seen many friends of mine and acquaintances over the years with Fitbits, but I haven't seen any, behavior is really hard to change. And when it comes to Fitbits, I see them, they start trying to get their steps in, but then you have gravity and inertia setting back in, and the habits go back to being what they were. And so, yes, there was maybe a short spike in behavior change, but I think because the payoffs aren't visible quick enough, or people just tend to fall back into the old habits. But I really like this idea of, like you mentioned, of knowing consciously that because I'm saving water here, someone somewhere else is benefiting from that. So I think maybe in your case, I feel like even though esoteric tangible, I feel like there's more tangibility to it.
That's I appreciate that. Obviously, as a consumer company, we're not immune to consumer psychology. So I don't pretend to think that a portion of our users won't experience the same thing. But at the same time, we do believe we have a higher calling, and all the gaming mechanics aside to keep people engaged. we think, getting people, reminding them why they do this I think helps engagement. And, we've only been around for a month and a half. Ask me again in 3 months. But so far engagement has been great.
It's funny you mentioned gaming because I can almost see, neighbors or neighborhoods participating from a gaming perspective is who saved the most water this month. People tend to enjoy those kind of games. So I can see a gaming aspect to the app.
That's right. Absolutely. We're tinkering with a few things, so stay tuned.
Oh, for sure. So, Alan, one of the things I like to really push for in these conversations is, the Simon Sinek, the why behind what you're doing. You kind of touched on it briefly in the beginning, but I mean, to dedicate your time, your commitment to this company, there's got to be more. So, if you don't mind, could you share some of that why?
Sure. I told you about the story in Nepal, which, took place last year, but really, truly, the roots of the company go back 40 some odd years to when I was born. So I was born in Asia, in Taiwan specifically, and my grandfather was a farmer. So growing up, water truly was a lifeline. And so, all of us, my grandfather had 9 kids for obvious reasons. But we were all raised to be super mindful about how we use this very precious resource. And so fast forward, 20 some odd years, I moved to California. I'm not sorry, no, 20 some odd years ago, in the late 80s, I moved to Taiwan to California. And, we weren't poor by any means. But despite that, we were still very conscious in our homes about how we would use and reuse and recapture and recycle water. And so I've been trying to, for the longest time, looking for a way for my professional background in consumer tech to intersect with my passion around water. And that's actually when the Nepal trip happened. And so, from a high level purpose and vision standpoint, we all believe, and I certainly believe, that access to clean water is a fundamental human right. That people should have an unalienable right to live with dignity and to live to their fullest potential. So what can we do as a for-profit organization, given that we're a water tech company, to also help advance that goal? And so that is very much an ethos of who we are. And we're reminded daily, in the startup world, things are tough. You have massive ups and downs on a day-to-day basis. But when things get rough, it's time for us to kind of step back and remind ourselves, why we are doing this in the first place. So that why, to your point, is drives is our North Star.
Well, that's fantastic. Again, pointing back to Simon Sinek, he talks about companies that have a just cause, and I think the ability to rally around a just cause is what pulls you through those hard times. I've got experience in the startup world too, and I remember sometimes, when things did get difficult, just kind of remembering, why am I doing this? Part of it goes back to the children, but part of it goes back to the just cause. So I can really, really see that, and I hope your grandparents are proud of what you're doing today.
Oh, thank you so much. This is my 6th startup, so I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. And I've been through startups, the good and the bad, and so I learned, made a lot of mistakes in the past, and hopefully this one, I've leveraged all my learnings. But I've seen companies who are all about the profit, and the morale is low when things don't go well. But something just feels very different about this one, and that is palpable here inside the office. And is very much of our company culture. And I have, we're very proud of the things that we're doing here and what the team has done and continues to do.
So some of your other startups, what were they based around?
So when I say 6 startup, first 3 were the ones that I joined, but the last 3 were the ones that I started. I mean, the first startup back in the late 90s, early 2000, we were building web tablets, PDA, voice over IP phones, and just to date myself a little bit, one of our early web tablets that we built was running WinCE, and Bill Gates held up our tablet at was it WinHeck or Comdex, which is no longer exists for some of your listeners. So that was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And soon after that is when I got into the consumer electronics kind of wireless communication IoT field. I was working on IoT before IoT was called IoT. And so that's when I got into the semiconductor business, building IoT subsystems to enable other platforms to become wirelessly connected. My last corporate job was with a company called Atheros Communications that was acquired by Qualcomm. And that's what I started and ran the consumer electronics business in the mid 2000s. And that's when, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth were still predominantly in your computers and laptops, and your routers and gateways at home. But I felt that wouldn't it be nice if our TVs or printers or gaming consoles or other things inside your home also had wireless access. So we had a nice jump on the market, and we were shipping a lion's share of wireless connected consumer electronics devices inside the home. And that's when I decided to experiment with entrepreneurship. And so in 2009, I believe, is when I started my first company. The company was called Ekta Systems. Ekta is also another Sanskrit for for oneness, or we believe that there's an invisible cosmic fabric that connects all of us. And what we were doing at Ekta was we were building we were essentially turning your cell phone and using the various radios as a radar to discover and connect with IoT and other machines around you. Unfortunately, it was a little bit ahead of its time back in 2009. And that company, unfortunately, had to shut down, and learn a ton of both hard and soft skills in terms of running a startup. But a few iterations later, here I am here at Pani.
So I know you're only a month and a half old into market, but with the rapidly changing pace of IoT, 5G coming online, let's play a futuristic game. What other opportunities do you see for conservation using IoT and some of these new or improved frequencies that we have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, I mentioned earlier in the call, the arc of the company is three phases: measure, monitor, and recycle. The first product is for the measurement kind of side of things, but we are starting now to prototype and starting to move towards the monitoring piece, which means we are, in addition to looking at how much water you're using, we'll be looking at what's inside your water. So water quality. So we're experimenting with various types of sensors that will allow us to detect lead, arsenic, mercury, E. coli, chloramine, all these things in real time. And for many of these elements, real-time detection doesn't exist. So we're doing a lot of groundbreaking work in that front in terms of bringing water quality monitoring inside the home, as opposed to these labs you have to send your water off to, and these $500,000 machines with trained technicians operating them. How do we leverage technology, shrink them down into a price point that is feasible for people to install inside their home? And so these platforms, today obviously we use Wi-Fi in the Pani Smart Water Monitor for a variety of reasons, predominantly because Wi-Fi is a very well understood and prevalent infrastructure inside the home. But over time, when we see 5G coming down the road, it is something that we'll definitely look into. Our bandwidth requirements aren't super high, but as we start to move towards leveraging machine learning to look at various chemical signatures in water, it'll be a balance between processing that data locally versus dumping that off to the cloud to do some processing, upon which time and bandwidth would become a more important concern. So things like 5G, we're really excited to learn about. And as they start to get deployed and as price points start to come down, we will be seeing how that fits into the framework of our communications topology.
So I'm sure you and I could really nerd out on edge computing and the benefits of. Sounds like you're going to be utilizing some of that.
When you say edge computing, it also means something different for Pani, because we believe in edge water processing. We believe long-term water processing as a function needs to be decentralized, which means the ability to process water has to move closer to the edge and to the nodes. So homes and buildings in the future we'll start to reclaim, reuse, and recycle water. And that is the ultimate long-term goal of the company, is to understand, not just understand how much water you're using, not just understand what contaminants are in your water, but to be able to process and filter that water inside the home.
So that is really interesting because, especially with the movement right now towards microgrids and decentralization, I think that could become, a unique proposition, especially for some of these new commercial buildings that are being, put up, or housing communities. That's a really interesting viewpoint. As you were talking about some of the sensors, I was thinking about Flint, Michigan, and some of the problems that could have been avoided, had your sensors been in place.
That's right. What's amazing to me is that water is one of the most important things you put in your body, but nobody knows what's inside the water that you drink. And I think people inherently trust our water utility to deliver clean, safe drinking water. And for the most part, that is true. But given that the water infrastructure is aging, and that it's actually coming upon a massive replacement cycle. A lot of the biggest water systems in the U.S. were installed in the middle of the 20th century, so in the 1950s, and so their useful life is 60, 75 years. So we're coming upon a point in which equipment and infrastructure and pipes are getting old, and but we don't have the budget to fix and replace them, and so in that macro environment, I think understanding water quality becomes that much more important. And the issue with water is, by the time people know something's wrong with your water, you've been drinking bad water for months. And that's scariest with Flint, Michigan, right? So there is no real-time detection. And we want to bring that capability to utilities and to consumers. And essentially democratize access to water quality information in real time.
And it sounds like, also, I just read recently about GE's reinvigorated push towards what they're called digital focus. And they said they're investing a lot of money in their asset performance management. And it's the cornerstone of, for example, inspection, planning, and auditing. So it sounds like you're almost following that same cycle.
So it's interesting you say that. So if you think about the Nest thermostat, as they become deployed with a certain amount of density, the amount of data they can collect in terms of how energy is being used in any given neighborhood at any given time, that information is very valuable to utilities. Now imagine having these sensors installed in consumer homes with a certain amount of density in neighborhoods. Knowing water quality at various distribution points and at various geographical locations, you can start to tease out some interesting information about the water flow and water quality and where things are coming from. And that information utilities can use to better maintain their infrastructure. So instead of a blanket overhaul of all the plumbing and piping, you can start to see certain trends of water quality in certain geographic areas, and that would help utilities better manage their capital investments over time.
And with your sensors, it sounds like they can get an early warning too if there's any issues.
That's the idea. And again, real-time lead sensors don't exist today. People are working on them with various types of approaches. We're taking a system-level approach. So we're working with companies who are at the cutting edge of building, nanotubes that can, see lead in real time, or using other novel methods to detect lead. So we're kind of knee deep in that R&D right now.
Yeah, I think so. We just built a home earlier this year, and I think what they call low flow showers and low flow toilets have become actually code now. So I think this could really, really help benefit builders, or especially end consumers too. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a variety of ways we can go to market. I think our goal is to build something cost accessible enough where you can walk down the aisles at Home Depot and pick something up yourself. And of course, allowing builders to differentiate, their properties to say, we're able to monitor your water quality in real time and make sure you're drinking clean water. That's absolutely it's low hanging fruit for us for sure. Also, partnering with utilities to deploy these across their jurisdiction. That's also something that we are and engage with and have conversations today.
Almost like some of the, well, I mean, I think if the utilities participate in a way that solar credits, for example, or I think there was a few years ago high efficiency credits where if you did X amount of work to your homes, you can actually get tax credits back.
That's right. That's right. There's always ways for them, for them to differentiate. We're building, green homes or environmentally conscious homes. So for sure, and I think, I applaud all of them for doing that, and I think more of the world needs to do the same. At the same time, there's a lot of legacy products that are installed in homes today. That when you install a Pani monitor, you can see your shower head is running at 2.2 gallons per minute. And then, we can work with Home Depot or with their utility to say, hey, look, go in with this coupon. You can save 25% off of this low flow shower head and get that, that water culprit off of the water network, so to speak.
Well, I'm in love with the idea, and I can't wait to get one on our shower at home so my kids can start monitoring their showers, especially with 3 girls.
That's exactly right. And what's interesting along those lines is, most major water utilities have some conservation program and they have incentives. At the same time, those programs are very quote unquote analog. They'll call you and say, hey, we'll come in and do a water audit for you. They'll send emails, they'll send paper mail, but at the same time, they have no idea if any of their outreach is working. And so when they can subsidize a digital device like a Pani, we digitize we turn dumb water pipes into a smart water network. So utilities can finally see, oh, they're actually doing what we're suggesting them to do, and they're actually taking tangible steps to conserve water, and their incentives can be delivered, based upon performance, right? So there's actually accountability and loop closure and attribution when it comes to water conservation.
Alan, as you were speaking, my mind's opening up to all kinds of creative ways to use your device.
It's funny you say that. As an entrepreneur, you build a product and you think people will use it a certain way, and when you throw it out into the real world, you're always surprised about all the innovative and creative ways people are using your product. And and the Pani monitor is no different. People are using it for indoor farming, and I'll leave it at that. Other people are using it for, and this is a real interesting use case, is, we're getting a lot of people installing these in their parents' homes. The parents are elderly, they're aging, and many have, some unfortunately have Alzheimer's, and they're keeping track of their bathroom behavior to make sure they're keeping up with their hygiene, or they're on certain medication, they want to make sure they're going to the bathroom. And what's also interesting is, companies who provide services to senior living and to assisted care facilities, they want to know how their patients and their tenants are doing. And one of the interesting stats that I found out is a third of elderly people over the age of 65 experience a traumatic fall, and 80% of those falls happen in the bathroom. So some of our users are monitoring shower, not just for showering, but if the shower lasts too long, that something might have happened in the shower, and they'll dispatch a caretaker or a nurse to check up on the patient. So, things we never imagined, going and building the product, people are finding very practical ways to use the product, which is, phenomenal, right?
So that's really interesting because, especially when it comes to the elderly, there's, I believe, 3 leading indicators: gait, diet, and bathroom habits.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
So that, when you mention the bathroom habits to monitor elderly, I can totally see where assisted living centers would put that in, or like you said, people that are aging in place or aging at home, children that aren't living close by can start installing these units.
Right. If the mom hasn't showered in 4 days, that might have forgotten. They'll call someone or call them to check in, or if the shower has been running for an hour and a half, someone better go in there.
Right. So it sounds like you got your work quite cut out for you, but you've got a huge market to move into.
Yeah, we're excited to be doing what we're doing, and as the product matures and as we build new products, we're very we're eager to see what lies ahead.
Well, Changing directions a little bit, Alan, one of the questions I like to ask my guests is, what advice would you give to the audience? And it could be broad or specific, but what have you learned in all these years of perhaps entrepreneurship or building companies or just in general?
Yeah, it's good and a tough one. On the entrepreneur journey, you'll meet a lot of people, a lot of supporters and naysayers. Right? And if you talk to 10 people, you'll get 11 different options. So oftentimes you don't know who to trust and listen to. So, what I've learned is always be open-minded to get feedback from people that you trust. But at the same time, know when to put on your blinders and just run like a man on a mission. And sometimes you just have to trust your gut. So it's a fine balance between tenacity and stubbornness, and that line is different for everyone. But it's important one to straddle. That it's been a very important part of my personal entrepreneur journey.
Well, I like that. Know when to run and know when to listen and know when to seek advice and when not to, or listen to advice and when not to. I really appreciate that, Alan. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to see where Pani goes in the future. And you mentioned checking back in, and I'd love to check back in next year with you and perhaps do another episode and find out where you are on your journey.
Oh, the pleasure has been mine, Raj. I thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Alan, so much, and then we'll look forward to catching up with you soon.
Take care.